welcome to part 3 of Algorithms in Advertising. This one is called Prediction Machines, and we're going to get into machine learning algorithms and start talking about how they work. Let's go back and think about what we covered in episode 2, the human algorithm, where we had a campaign that was laid out a lot like the classical model of the funnel in brand advertising, and then a human method and a machine method that were really biased toward DR. So we call this tension between brand advertising and DR that we saw played out, steering against the autopilot. The destination that the advertiser was aiming for was some kind of perfect mix of brand advertising and DR. Like the marketer knows that reach is important, so targets 3 audiences, and including one that's quite big. And he also knows that efficiency is important, so allows for optimization to DR. And the lesson to take away from 2 is that it looks like it was a little bit over optimized to the DR side because of the way the machine works. So it's a lot like if you have a destination of San Francisco and your airplane's autopilot is leaving New York, but it's tuned to LA. So while it's trying to fly to LA to get south, you have to steer your airplane a little bit north against that autopilot to get to San Francisco. And the people who make the autopilot feel like, well, we got you west. That was good enough. And the steering hopefully is going to get you someplace that you're satisfied with so that you'll keep doing this form of advertising. So there's a lot of steering against the autopilot in advertising. So let's dig in on what this autopilot is doing. So we talked about the kind of simple predictive model based on rolling a dice. To do the kind of predictive model that has to do with predicting whether or not a prospect will become a customer and that we'll get credit for creating that customer in our campaign, is usually some form of what's called lookalike modeling. And lookalike should be familiar to us from usage, right? If you shop on Amazon or Netflix, they have some form of customers who like what you like, also like this, right? A recommendation algorithm is based on a lookalike. And if you've ever seen deepfakes, those are literally lookalikes, right? Where you're creating something in video that looks like usually a celebrity. So here's how lookalikes are created. Now, for example, I'll use something that has nothing to do with advertising, but is probably something all of us have some familiarity with as a student, and that's predicting who will get into a selective college. So if you're going to build a model for who gets into a selective college, the model's features, everyone would pick pretty much the same thing. There's the student's grades, their scores on standardized tests, their activities and accomplishments. They write an essay, they get recommendations, and usually they have some kind of background that might be valuable to the school as they're trying to diversify or recruit from specific backgrounds for whatever reason. So those features can all be quantified. With modern techniques, you could even have text-based features, right? The recommendation text could be processed in this day and age. And you could imagine each student being a row and then having scores across all the columns that are features. Now, what you can do if you're the school or you have access to the school's data is take a data set of people who actually got into the school with all the rows and columns filled out. And then you could compare every student you come across to this model. And you can say, do they look enough like this model for them to get in, right? If you did that effectively, you would have the ability to predict from any student that you have data on whether or not they'll get in to this selective school. So that is what is done by advertising algorithms. The features that they're recording for every conversion are things like the site they were reached on by advertising, the device they used to load that ad, the geography they were in when they loaded it, maybe the time of day and day of week, and of course, which creative variation, right? Which actual ad they saw. All these things can be logged, and to the extent they look like a converter or not can be quantified. And then that quantity could result in a very logical bid, right? Given the propensity of this prospect to convert, I'm willing to pay this much. And if you do that over and over, you get the ability to predict CPA, right? Just as we showed in the human example, the CPAs didn't change an enormous amount. They changed because we changed the budgets and the frequency, but the propensity of conversion for each pool, and we implied that the bids were set appropriately according to that propensity, makes the conversion rate pretty stable. That's something advertisers really want. So in a nutshell, that's what's going on all the time. And the reason that advertising platform algorithms and advertising tend to be biased somewhat toward DR is that they're taking the immediate near-term data to compare the prospect to customers. If the prospect needs 6 months to become a customer, there isn't a mechanism in most platform algorithms to measure, if I make this prospect aware, will they consider when they come into the category market, and what's the propensity they'll purchase after they come into category, right? That's a great deal of prediction. It can be done, but it's usually in the realm of custom algorithms. So back to machine algorithms that are basically predicting the near-term propensity of a prospect to become a customer based on a set of data features that are available as ads are served in the digital marketplace. So if you go in and analyze this data, as the platform owners absolutely do, they could learn more about which prospects become customers. And this is another way that the humans and machines interact. The machines are not good at figuring out why certain fields turn out to be more important than others, or why some feature values turn out to be especially important to prediction. But they can tell you what those features are and what those feature values are if you have access to the algorithm data. And I'll give an example from the early days of digital advertising, an actual experience of mine. I was working for a company that was selling flat screen TVs, which were new at the time, as was internet advertising. We were able to build an algorithm and look into it. And what we saw is that of all the fields from the advertising data, the most important for prediction by far was the address. And then when we looked at which addresses were most predictive of selling a flat screen TV, we found they had something in common. They were military addresses. So the machine algorithm learned this and served more ads to military addresses and probably bid more for prospects on military bases, but it never knew why. And the humans are relatively good, or much better than the machines, but some better than others, of coming up with stories for why this happens. And the story I came up for why it happens is, oh, this makes perfect sense. There's a lot of young people in the military. Their room and board is fully paid, but they have a job. The first thing they're going to spend their money on is entertainment, video games, sports, movies, hence the latest TV technology, a big flat screen TV for home in the barracks or wherever they live on or off base. So that's an example of how the human superior ability for storytelling, creative storytelling, and explanation comes together with a machine learning algorithm that garnered information without insight, but that married with insight becomes very useful for an advertiser looking to sell out a stock of flat screen TVs. So that's it for episode 3. In episode 4, we'll go a little deeper into our examples to talk about the common outputs and some possible future outputs from deeper integration of the human algorithm and the predictive machine. Thanks.